Welcome to today's tutorial, guys. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we got a fun one. We're going to be breaking down, give you guys my thoughts, feelings towards Lyrical Lemonade, Cole Bennett's new music video, Eminem, Godzilla featuring Juicewrld. I watched this one time through already, and my initial reaction was, I think it's one of Lyrical Lemonade's best music videos I've seen for them. I thought it was really great, and there's a lot of reasons why I think that. So we're gonna go ahead and break down what I like about it. We're gonna talk about some things that you aspiring directors could pay attention to, you aspiring editors could pay attention to, and learn from this music video. And then of course, we're gonna hop into Adobe Premiere and After Effects and some 3D softwares after the fact, and we're gonna show you how you can recreate some of the visual effects that you see in this music video on your own by yourself. So sit back, relax, enjoy the video. So right off the bat here, our opening scene, pretty cool concept for our intro. You see you have these custom labels for the music video, Godzilla Whiskey, Eminem. You can shoot on just a simple green screen and then just do a simple track to place him there. We're going to show you that later on. And then they also place some faces in here as well. So let's keep going forward here so we can talk a little bit more. There's with full motion. I'm not playing the audio here because of copyright reasons, but another thing that I want to mention is how well the visual plays in with the audio. So a lot of these lyrics are playing into what is actually happening on screen. It gives this narrative, it gives this story aspect to it. And then moving into our first scene here, you have our first kind of crazy 3D visual effect. To place these 3D figures behind Eminem here, what they would have had to do is rotoscope a layer so that they could place him in front of our Godzilla 3D characters here, which again, we're going to teach you how to place some 3D walking characters like this into your videos. What they could have done is they could have had this scene shot twice on a motion control rig. The first shot would be just the camera moving at the same speed of the empty hallway, and they could use that as a clean plate for tracking in the Godzillas, and then they could have shot it the exact same way, not changed the continuity, not moved anything in the back here, and had Eminem do his performance scene, in which way you have one layer where you have your same hallway, same movement, but you have Eminem, which you can isolate later in post, and then your second layer, just your clean plate. Now you have this shot coming right here. You have a lot of blurring. This is probably a lot of in-camera effects. They could have put glass in front of the lens as you see here, or they could have done some blurring in post to replicate this sort of look. But if you want to create this yourself, you can literally take something like a wine glass. You can put your camera on a tripod, use the handle to control it to get that up in your face movement, add a ton of motion blur, and then flash the glass in front of the screen. You can also use some sort of blur effects, and we'll talk about recreating all that in post later. So moving on a little bit, another really cool effect where we have Eminem's face pasted over some extras. Now we're going to talk about a few different ways where you can do this, some After Effects plugins, some things like facial tracking, everything. We'll talk about that later. Moving forward here, this is another really great scene that I like a lot. This is the conversation to yourself where we have your stand-ins for each sort of angle. So if we play this a little bit slower, so if we play this slowly, whenever we have this angle looking towards Eminem in the suit, Eminem in the tuxedo, you can have your stand-in here who is someone just wearing a gray hoodie, someone wearing a gray hoodie, maybe similar haircut, but you're not seeing their exact face. And then it swaps over to the side, makes you feel like he's talking to himself. As you can see, here is the stand-in. Here is the stand-in, no masking needed. You just have to have an extra wearing the same exact outfit as Eminem for both scenes. Use some creative editing, some handheld work here, and piece them together to get this sort of conversation to yourself. Now, you're maybe noticing the main effect going on here, which is these crazy looking eyes. And I want to mention, one way to make creating this a lot easier on yourself is to not have this crazy movement that you're seeing here when you shoot the shot. You can place your shot on a tripod, and then you can use an After Effects camera to do all that and add all the shakiness later on in post. That way you have a nice clean plate where you can do all the tracking and nothing's going to be messed up, so that it allows you to manipulate the eyes, the face, whatever it is you're doing later on. We'll talk about some easy ways to accomplish it and some things you want to look out for whenever you are creating it. Now again, going back to the art direction and set design, you see you have this split kind of set here. You have that initial grocery store, liquor store area here. You have your red carpet. So great way to visually represent the feeling that they're trying to express through the words in the song. They talk a lot about drinking. They talk a lot about alcohol, about addiction. I'm not going to delve too far into that, but I do want to just point out with what the song has in mind. This is a great shot to visually kind of explain that. You're going to see a lot more examples of this creative camera movement, creative angles to express the story, express the song a lot better as we move forward. Keep that in mind whenever you're creating your own videos. A lot of people out there, a lot of you directors, you get to your video shoot, you have your one set here, you set your camera up here, and you just let it shoot just like this. Think about different creative ways where you can tell the story a little bit better, or where you can create some sort of creative look, creative angle, even if there is no narrative. Something as simple as that can add a lot more to what you are trying to create. Now moving into this area here where we start drinking some more of the whiskey, and we're gonna get some really interesting drunk looking effects, and you'll see that on the outside with the blur. You'll see that with this little RGB split that's happening on everyone. Something like this is pretty easy to recreate within After Effects, within Adobe Premiere even. Keep in mind the reason why it works appropriately here. I see a lot of people using effects like this, the trails, the disoriented looks in normal footage, just because they don't know what to add, so they just slap it on. The reason why they're adding it here is because it's playing in with the story. He's kind of stumbling himself, so it makes sense to add something like this. So let's break this down scene by scene. So I started to say it earlier, but I kind of cut myself off. The reason why I love this scene in particular, and I think why this scene of him walking through the store makes the video so much better, is because it's adding motion. It's carrying you through the song, through the story as you experience it. And something like that is a lot better storytelling technique visually than just having someone stand there, taking your camera and just recording them with a different background. But you have your big RPG rocket launcher with some cool visual effects to play in with that. And we'll talk about some of these destruction VFX, and you can even see some of the distortion going on here to kind of play in with that, create the ripple and really add into the effect. You got your smoke assets, you got your fire, your ember assets. We'll talk all about that later on in the tutorial part of this. So let's keep going through here. Here's where some of the coolest visual effects come into play. So we've got this shot here, which I thought was really awesome. We're going to talk about how you guys can recreate this. So this is a really cool way to put a spin on a shot that's pretty static. Now you have this nice high angle here so that you can have a lot of the surroundings, and then you have all of these really awesome VFX floating knives in the background here. So we're going to talk about how you guys can create that yourself, whether it's knives or whether it's knives or any other floating object around a person. It's actually pretty simple. And then some more 3D, some Lego blocks, and they talk a lot about blocks in the lyrics, so I think that's sort of an inspiration for that. Another awesome scene here, some great camera movement overhead going into those knives and really getting up close and personal with them. Now you can create some of this slime with some 3D simulation stuff. We'll talk all about that in the 3D portion of this. So this scene here is a great example of a lot of working parts within film production meshing and working perfectly together. So you have all of your Eminem CDs, you have your Juicewrld CDs, as you see when we fly up here. This really awesome CD mount set here with your overhead lighting coming down, which production value wise, art design wise, super cool set. You can see we have some floating CD versions in here in our foreground, and you'll see as we kind of flutter up, there's a lot more floating around. And this kind of reminds me of that 13 Reasons Why effect, where you have the different Polaroids floating in space. And this is going to be using one of the tools that we talk about for a lot of these effects in the tutorial portion, which is your 3D camera tracker, and then taking things and tracking them in the scene, whether it's floating knives, floating CDs. So again, what I like about the video so far: production, art design, great, very creative scenes, a lot of cool stuff going on. Number two, and this one I think is the most important of why I like the video so far. Let's clear up some space here. The creative movement, the camera angles, it carries you through the story. You're not just seeing a bunch of different scenes, you're seeing the story literally taking place and you're being carried throughout it. And then number three, what I'm liking about the video so far is they use visual effects as a story making tool, not just to slap it on and make it look pretty. Sometimes you have to know when something is oversaturated with effects. Sometimes you have to know when there's not enough effects. A lot of people are kind of iffy when it comes to visual effects in music videos. Sometimes you'll just see pure cinematic. Sometimes you'll see oversaturated with effects. And as we zoom along here, we have really awesome set design. Again, going back to the production value, did a great job. Let's move back. And you can see as the camera goes up, just great timing with everything, great frame blocking where he goes in at the perfect time, all the lights turn on at the perfect time, and then again, you have your 3D CDs here, which we'll talk about how you can track those in. When you're using things like fire on the legs, when you're using things like this floating blood, this disoriented, this quick camera movement, that's all things that are playing in with the way the song sounds and how it makes you feel. So moving forward, another really cool set in terms of the planning, the set design. You have this cool kind of gory liquid coming in here. So we'll talk about how you can create some simulations that look like this blood. And as we move forward, they're used in this kind of track scene where we move out and then it moves back in to the butcher part, and you see all the blood kind of floating in space. So that's the same exact technique as when you have the knives floating in space and when you have the CDs floating in space. You have that 3D camera projection, but all in all, beautiful scene. I thought this looked super cool. So moving on to here, we talked about how you can add moons into your scenes in that Lil Nas X full breakdown tutorial that we talked about recently. This is very reminiscent of that, where this is definitely a fake moon. And then you have Dr. Dre as well, and Eminem taking care of himself in that kind of self-conversation. Pay attention to the camera movement here, because this is again what I'm talking about when I talk about creative movement, not just carrying you through the scene, matching the grittiness of the song. You're not just going to have a camera tripod and then just have Eminem talk. If you have this quick, fast-paced, gritty, you want the camera to be shaking, put you in the moment. And not only that, but the visual is representing that with these stressful situations that you're seeing, where you have kind of butcher cooler with all the blood flying around, where you have all these knives pointing at you, where you have this kind of stressful hospital situation here, the panic. You want to match that. These are all great visual things to match in with the song, and this is definitely a smart, witty thing to play off of. His mouth literally shoots off his face here. You got the big eyes again, and if we kind of just go frame by frame, you'll see this is the mouth layer, just putting a mask around it. They put a little, some sort of, you can even say a dust asset, some kind of distortion asset here just to make it look like it's popping off. And then they use this kind of blurred out technique, which I've talked about in a tutorial before on my video. I've talked about this in 2 different tutorials on my channel before, to wipe away a facial feature. In this case, it's his mouth. So we'll talk about that later on. We'll show you exactly how to do that. Great video. Let's get into the tutorial aspect. We're going to show you guys some cool things that you can learn from this, like 3D characters, flying things around you, some different camera techniques, everything from the basics to the advanced. Let's get right into it. All right, guys, so for adding your face onto any sort of label, in this case, it was the alcohol label here. Pretty simple. We're going to go to pexels.com. I found some clips here of some close-up beer bottles. These are all free to download. Link down below if you want to check it out. I'm going to go ahead and just download this one here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring this into After Effects. So let's just show you some of the more simple things first. We're going to work through Adobe Premiere and After Effects, and then at the end of the tutorial, we're going to show you the 3D heavy things like tracking things in your scene, doing the crazy stuff like the floating knives, etc. We're going to go ahead and right click on this clip and click scale to frame size. And then we're going to right click on that and we're going to go to replace with After Effects composition. And of course, I've said it a million times, if you guys only have After Effects, you can just open up your clip in After Effects. But I like working with the dynamic link. So once you're in After Effects, let's go ahead and take a look at our footage. Perfect, because there's not a lot of movement, so it's not going to be too complicated. I'm going to right click on filters for my video capture device and just turn off the chroma key. Now you guys can see what this green screen is looking like. And there we go. I have a little green screen clip of me, which we're going to use in place of the label. So let's get rid of the green in the background. We're going to go to our effects and presets here on the right, and I'm going to search for a little key light effect, place that onto our green screen clip here, grab the dropper in our effect controls and just select the green. I can also change this little 3-dot color button here to alpha. We can hide the bottom layer under screen matte. We can kind of use those to try and make this as silhouette as possible, like that. And then we can bring back the color, just change that back to RGB. Looking a bit better. Let's go ahead and bring back our bottom footage here, just show the visibility, and now we're able to place this where we want. So I can select the layer, click S on my keyboard to scale it, and we'll just scale it down. You can even create a little mask just clicking the square mask tool here. If you're not seeing that, click Q on your keyboard, and then I'll just draw a little square around myself. And I'll just roughly kind of position this where the label is. Okay, guys, so what I'm gonna do is just to quickly remove some of these words and just to kind of clean this up to be able to place my face over top of it. I'm just gonna go ahead and select my original footage here and click Control D to duplicate it. I'm gonna right click on that duplication and rename it to cover up, and on that cover up layer I'm going to select my pen tool, so click G or just grab it from your toolbar here, and I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to select the outside area here where this red lettering is, and I'll try and select the general area of that. So now if we hide this, you'll see that we have this isolated layer here with the add-on. So let's go ahead and blur this a bit. We're going to go ahead and search for the Gaussian blur effect, so search for that in your effects and presets and just drop that on the cover up layer. And then we're gonna grab the blurriness value here and just bump that up even past 50, 115 I would say. Now you can still see the original label underneath it. So what we're gonna do is click M on cover up and just Control C, select the bottom layer, Control V to paste that mask, and then switch it to subtract. So if we click M, you'll see the mask on the bottom layer. It removes everything because it's on add. You want to change that to subtract. Now you see these kind of black edges here because there's nothing underneath these layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click in this gray space and go to New, Solid. And I'm going to click this dropper, select the yellow, and click OK. So now we just have a normal yellow solid here. I'm just going to drag this in a layer below everything. So now we have the same color, but we kind of have this jagged edge. So we can click M on all these layers to bring up our mask options. And if we expand that, we can actually feather this a tiny bit on both of them. So we'll feather this one as well until this is basically invisible. You can also grab the mask and just adjust however you may need. So here's what that's looking like so far. And if you wanted to take it a step further, you'll see that with the lighting, it gets a little darker on the right edge here. So you guys can even look up a little gradient map, gradient ramp effect, and drop that onto your solid. For our start color, we can choose this lighter yellow on the left here, as you can see. For the dark yellow, we select this dark yellow on the right. And now you can just grab the two little anchor points for this. You'll see if we change this coordinate, this little thing is moving. So we'll put the end of the ramp around here and the start of the ramp, which is right there, around the left side. So you can kind of create your own little gradient if you so choose. And that's looking fine for now. So let's bring back the footage of me. And you'll notice I just kind of made this black and white. To do that, you can just search for the HLS effect, color balance, and just drop that here. Grab your saturation in your effect controls and just drag that all the way down, or however you may like it. And now we're even going to do some more masking just to kind of make some more room for this. I want it to kind of be like that. What I'm going to do is select our original footage again, Control D. We'll rename that to cover up 2. With cover up 2, we can click M and just delete any masks. And you'll see it'll bring back the original footage. This time we're going to go ahead and mask out this kind of mineral water text that we got here. So right about there is looking pretty fine. Again, we're going to add this over top. So let's show this layer again, and we'll kind of shave off these edges here. Now if we click M, we can actually delete this mask one we made earlier so that we only have this new mask, and then open up that new mask, and then we're going to feather that as well just to kind of blur those edges. You can even grab your mask expansion, drag it back. You guys can mess around with whatever blending mode you think looks best. This is going to blend whatever sort of footage you're trying to mix here with the background color of the bottle. And here is what that final result looks like. Pretty cool effect, cool way to incorporate props and yourself, and it's a pretty easy composite to pull off. All right guys, so back in Adobe Premiere, we're gonna work from the easiest, work our way up like I said before. So we're gonna show you some basic little blurring that you can do in post. You can go ahead and just search for a blur effect. There's a lot of different ones that you can work with. You have everything from your channel, compound, directional, Gaussian blur. I'm gonna go with some Gaussian blur here. To kind of create that blur on the edges look, I'm gonna hold down my Alt key and just click and drag up to duplicate my footage and just drag it into a video layer above. We're gonna drag the Gaussian blur onto our duplicated layer. And then in my effect controls in the top left, you'll see here's my Gaussian blur effect. We can go ahead and select any of these masking tools. So I'll use the pen tool here and kind of draw this sort of jagged area around the sides. And to actually see the blur, we need to scroll down here, crank up the blurriness. You're gonna see the middle get all blurry. Let's go ahead and invert that. So just click inverted. And now let's kind of feather so it doesn't look like such a cutout. So we can go to mask feather here and just bump that value up. You'll also want to click repeat edge pixels so that this doesn't really fade out near the edge. And we can feather that a lot. Maybe lower the mask expansion a tiny bit. We're gonna build onto our next effect, which is the sort of drunk disoriented, and that's adding on top of the blur that we've already added. So if you guys want, there's a few things that we can point out. I talked about the RGB splitting, fringing that's going on in the scene. There's a way where you can duplicate all the clips, use this arithmetic effect and kind of split them all. It's kind of an annoying process to do every time. So I recommend if you're going for some RGB, pick up a cheap plugin or preset. My Color King presets here, which are pretty easy to use. The Universe Red Giant plugins, they give you some really nice RGB ones, some sort of distortion ones as well. So as you can see, just by using the presets with a few clicks, a few drag and drops, I can change the scale here and add some of that RGB distortion, as you can see on the edges. And then again, if you want to check out some of the Universe ones, I like using the Universe Chromatic Aberration plugin that they have, because not only does it give you the fringing that you're seeing on the edges here, but it actually gives you a lot of different lens textures, a lot of different built-in blurs. And we talked about this in my tutorial I made for the weekend Heartless. A lot of that was this crazy sort of echoing going on throughout. You can do it with a simple echo effect, which is built into Adobe Premiere. And if you want to see my take on how to create a bunch of different variations of the echo trails, I made a video about 5 different ghost trail effects, and you'll be able to see these trails which are being created. It's pretty computer intensive, but as you can see, looks pretty cool and adds into that disoriented look. So that's with it on, and I'll just flash it. That's normal. So as you can see, pretty cool. Pretty simple. Let's move on to our next effect. When it comes to the face replacement, there's 3 main ways that you can do this. The easiest way to do it is by using a green screen. I've seen a lot of people do it where they kind of cut the mask at the neck and then they track in their own green screen face using After Effects facial tracking tool or other built-in trackers like Mocha from Boris FX, or even third-party plugins like this awesome plugin Lockdown. And then of course all the way to the advanced, creating full 3D faces using photogrammetry tools and then tracking it onto the subject like you're seeing here. In blockbuster movies, you may be seeing that. For this example here, they use one of the more simple versions of doing it. So let's hop back over into After Effects. We're gonna right click, and then we're going to bring this into After Effects. Of course, to do this, you're going to need a green screen. If you need a cheap green screen, I'm gonna have an Amazon affiliate link below to the one that I use to record all of my tutorials. We've got this green screen shot of our lady that we're going to swap faces with, and then we've got me doing my best impression of super creep of this Eminem look here. Let me know if I nailed it or not. So we're gonna go to our effects and presets here, and we're gonna search for the key light effects. Go ahead and just drop that onto your footage here. Management settings, click that and just set that to alpha, and make sure that there's nothing showing underneath, or you'll kind of get this weird looking like that, or you'll kind of get it washed away like this. Go to the screen matte section, and you have your clip matte, you have your clip black and your clip white. We can just bump up the clip black, but this is perfectly fine for now. And we're actually going to only use the face of this clip. To do that, we're going to use After Effects facial tracking, and this is very easy. It's going to create a mask of the face for us. You want to select your circular mask tool in the top left. If you're not seeing that, you can click Q or alt click this whatever shape is here until you have your ellipse tool. Now just draw an ellipse around your face like that. Now once you've done that, you want to click on your layer here. Click M to show your mask that you just created. Right click on that mask and click Track Mask. Now over here on the right, your tracker window should pop up once you've selected that. You're going to want to change your method to Facial Tracking Detailed Features, and then just click play. Make sure you're starting position here. Click play. And you're going to see it's going to create all the facial tracking details for my facial features. And you'll see all the tracking data there. And if we click off, you'll see we have a nice little RoboCop-esque mask around my face. And this is perfect because now we can just start blending and compositing this onto our other face. But before we do that, let's go ahead and hide this, show the footage we're trying to bring on. Let's do the same thing. Let's get that facial tracking detail and that mask around her face as well. So we're going to go ahead and just ellipse tool, draw it like that. Right click on the mask that you just created on that layer, click Track Mask, Facial Tracking Detailed Features, and then click play. Easy as that. It's one of After Effects' best tracking tools. Now, we don't want to have two floating heads here, so let's go ahead and just hide the mask. So you see mask 1 is set to add. That means it's only showing the face, none of the background. Just set that to none for now, because we don't need the mask on her face. We can keep the background. Now we can show my face here, and we can start actually scaling it and compositing it. So if we just click these little triangles, open up our transform, let's scale this up for now. And if you guys want, you can actually lower the opacity and just trying to eye it up where things would go. You can rotate it a tiny bit. Now, there's a few initial issues here. You'll see if we play this, our faces aren't tracked together. The second thing is we have this ugly looking line. It looks like something from Silence of the Lambs, where I just got my face cut off and put onto someone else's. We don't want to make it look like that. We don't want to make it look like that. We want to blend it and make it look as realistic as possible. So let's worry about the tracking first so that everything's in place. Now, there's a pretty simple way of doing this. We're just going to kind of link some layers because we already have the tracking information from our facial track. Let's open up our transform options for our top layer here, and we have position, we have scale, we have rotation, we have all that laid out. And you see position, hold down Alt, and while holding down Alt, you click this little stopwatch. You'll see that these are turning red, and you're going to have this little expression here, and it's saying transform.position. We're going to link the position of this face layer to the tracking of your eye. So grab this pick whip tool here, the little lasso that now popped up, click and drag that down to our right eye inner. This box, you'll see it highlights. Go ahead and select that. Creates the expression, just click away, and now you'll see it's following the movement of our face. We just need to make a little adjustment to put it over the face, but you see, if you try and grab this and drag it onto the face, it's not going to work because our position is locked into place with the tracking data to the eye, as you see here. So we can't change any of this. It'll just go back to what the track is. So what we have to do is grab our anchor point and just change your values until our anchor point places our face where we ultimately want it. And now if we play through, you'll see we're getting a little bit closer to our end goal. Now all we really need to do is just composite, maybe add a tiny bit of rotation where we need it, a little bit of scale where we need it, and do some mask cleanup. So let's start with that. So the first thing we're going to want to add in here is our beard is being cut off, and again, this isn't very smooth. So let's close everything to make it clean. Open up your first layer. I'm even going to rename this to face. Open up your face layer, open up your mask, and you see this is our mask around your face. You see this feather option, we can bump that up, and that's just going to blend it a bit, but it's also going to bring in some of the top part which we don't want. So we can also take our mask expansion and just lower that. Try and find a good in between. Of course, this is all going to depend on your footage, and it's going to be different every time. You'll see my hat is kind of cut in there, so I can just lower it a tiny bit again. But try and find the nice in between of feathering and mask expansion. To bring in something like the beard here, what you can do is you can mask expansion, but you don't want to bring in all this extra stuff as well. So instead of doing that, let's Control Z. Let's just select that layer. And we're going to create our own custom mask where we want to bring in any feature that we may want, like a beard. So I'll just click here around the jaw area where my beard would be, connect it. Here's what that's looking like, and it's looking janky again because we need to open mask number 2 we created. You can even just copy the settings. So 27 pixels on the feather. Let's go ahead and do that. And there you go. So now this lady has a beard. Now all you need to do is just select mask 2, make a little keyframe on your mask path, and just drag a bit. And just make sure that the mask isn't really getting cut off as this moves along. So you may need to make a tiny bit of keyframes there, but nothing crazy. There's one thing that's making this stand out a lot, and that is the skin color mismatch. You see in my clip, it's a little bit more saturated, a little more orange, and a little more warm. So let's try and match the original skin color with what we're pasting over top. And to do that, there's a lot of color correction. You can go down the rabbit hole with it. Let's just keep it simple. We're just going to add a little brightness and contrast, plop that on there, and we'll add a little, let's go with a little HLS effect. Can't type. Color balance, HLS, drop that. Now going into your effect controls, your brightness and contrast, let's go ahead and just play with these settings until we can match. And if you want to make it easier, just kind of zoom in and just change these settings until you see a good blend. So I'm going to lower the contrast because this is way too contrasty. That is basically all you need to know. So on my final comp, you'll see I just added a few more masks. I did the same exact thing that I did with the beard, except instead of adding a new mask on add, I added another mask on subtract. So if I go into my mask, you'll see this mask on subtract, just make sure anything on the top doesn't come in. This one would definitely need a little bit more cleaning up. I'll work on that now. But if you have absolutely no movement or minimal movement like they did in the music video for Godzilla, you're going to have a lot easier time. So that's really the key, is you want to have it on a tripod. You want to have as minimal movement as possible. If you're going like this, your face isn't probably going to look your face is probably going to be flying all over like a pancake. You want to keep it simple, keep it locked on a tripod, and make it as minimal movement as possible so that you can have a clean composite. And again, that's just using the simple basic tools which come available with After Effects. You can try things like Mocha, you can try things like third-party plugins, Lockdown. I'm not going to get too into that. We'll talk about it in later tutorials, but if you want to look more into it, if you're having trouble, check out the links that I've added down below in the resources, and you may find some useful information. All right, guys, moving on to the next thing. We're going to talk about a concept which we've talked about a lot on the channel in the past. I'll leave some resources below if you want to check out the old way we did this. We're going to build on these crazy eyes that you see right here. And of course, here's the example from the actual music video. We're not only going to talk about how to create the eyes, but we're going to talk about how to incorporate tracking, which is very easy, into this effect. Again, if you want to practice this footage, I found this on pexels.com, link below. I'm going to right click, replace with After Effects composition. So now we're looking at the actual layer footage. Now we can right click. We're going to track and stabilize, and you should see all of your trackers available to you. So if you're not seeing them, if they're grayed out, you just need to double click on the footage until you're seeing this blue layer. So we're going to click track motion for this one. It's going to pop up our track point and our tracker window here. If you're not seeing that window view, just find the tracker, make sure that's checked. We're going to place this on our right eye, his left eye, but I'm going to just call it right eye because we're looking at it from the right. And we're going to actually take the edge of this box, upper box, outer box usually goes along the rim of the eye, lower box usually goes along the eyelid. That's just kind of my rule of thumb that I like to do for the track. And before we actually fire this track up, we're going to need to create a little placeholder for all of this tracking information. So you have this giant gray space here, or you can go to Layer, New, Null Object. We're going to right click on that null object, and we're going to rename this to right eye tracking info. So this is basically just a placeholder layer to paste all of the keyframes, all of the tracking information which we're about to create. So click back on our footage here. If you need to, you can even open up your motion tracker, select your tracker. Now we're going to pay attention to our tracker window here on the right, or wherever in the workspace you're seeing it. We're going to go ahead and click Edit Target. And we're going to change the target layer from whatever your footage is saying to our new null that we just created. So right eye tracking info, and click OK. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to press play starting at my beginning position here, and you'll see what it would look like if it was a normal track. You see right here, it's kind of getting messed up. And the reason why it's getting messed up is because this particular shot was shot with a lot of motion blur. You see, as I drag along here, it's in focus, but as I move along, there's tons of motion blur. So depending on how your footage was shot, here's even a better example. If you don't have a clear, crisp shot that was shot with a high shutter speed, then it's gonna be very difficult to motion track. So we're gonna have to kind of go in and tweak manually. So it's kind of good that we're doing that just so I can show you the fix. But ultimately, if you are on set, if you're a director who's doing this, or if you're only doing the editing, you're on set, or if you're doing the VFX coordinator, consulting on set, always make sure that if you know tracking is going to be used, you need to shoot at a faster shutter speed so that there's less motion blur. If we just go by manually, we can open up our tracker window. You'll see all the keyframes being made. We can actually go ahead and fix this. So it messes up around here. So what you can do is you can just manually place this in the eye, and this is the same as if you were making your manual keyframe. So essentially we're not tracking anything here because the track messed up because of our blurry footage, but it's going to be fine. All we're doing is blowing up an area. So as long as we just keep clicking in the middle of the circle and just dragging it to relative pupil area, it's going to be fine. But again, you only have to manually fix and do this if your footage is blurry, if you can't get a clean track. You click page up and page down to move frame by frame like I am. Click, drag the box, into the pupil area. Drag along here in your trackers in the area you want, or of course, if you have a clean track from the get-go, you can go ahead and just click apply, and it's gonna say X and Y dimensions, that's fine, click OK. It's all applied to the null layer. If there's any keyframes that you need to adjust, again, page up, page down, if anything's not centered with the pupil, you can just drag it, zoom in here, select our original footage, and go to the effects and presets over here on the right. And we can search for the bulge effect. I've already searched it here. Click and just drag that onto your original footage clip. And now up in your effect controls in the top left, go ahead and select that. You may need to click this to see it. And we have our bulge effect. You see, if you click, you'll see where it's being affected. Now what we're gonna do is normally you can just click and drag this. You can crank these up. There you go. But as we move along, that spot is gonna stay in place. So what we're going to do is link it to that tracking info so that it's following along with the movement of our face. So to do that, let's open up original footage here. So click on the triangle and let's open up effects and then bulge. And you're going to see bulge center here. As you can select it, you'll see where it's placed just because I kind of dragged it right onto the eye. We're going to hold down Alt on our keyboard and we're going to click the stopwatch at our beginning position. So like that. The number should turn red. That means it's ready to, and you should see this expression here. It's also popping up a few tools. We have our pick whip tool. The value that we're going to link it to is actually the position in our tracking info. So go ahead and click P on that layer, or again, you can just open it up to transform. Here's our position. Everything is already moving correctly. So we're going to take bulge center. We're going to pick whip it. Click and drag, and you'll see this box selecting things. Pick whip it to our position, and it'll create the expression. Now you can just click away. And there you go. Now normally, if you're working on normal footage that isn't scaled at all, this would be right in the center. But what I actually did was I scaled this from 4K footage to 1080p footage. So all I need to do to adjust that, you'll see if I select bulge, it's actually tracked as I move along. It's moving with the actual null, but it's not in the exact place I want. To fix that, I just need to click down here in the expression editor and just write multiplied by 2. And that'll fix that issue. You probably won't have to do it, but in case you do run into that, there's a good fix. So multiply by 2, click it, now it's in the right spot. And if I move, you're gonna see he has kind of a wonky eye, but it's tracked. Now to design the eye, it's very simple. We just pop up to our effect controls with bulge in it. We select original footage, pop up to your effect controls where bulge is now linked, and you're just going to crank up your horizontal radius and your vertical radius just like that to get the look of the eye that you want. You can also kind of taper it if you want. So you now have a tracked, bulged eye. I'll play that through. You guys can experiment. Again, if there's any kind of jitteriness, if there's anything messing up in there, you just need to dive into the keyframes, make those manual adjustments. And again, if you want to have the best and easiest possible way to do this, take my advice with the shutter speed so that there isn't a lot of motion blur and you can get a nice clean track. Now for the shooting off a face effect, I've actually talked about how to wipe away features a while back in 2 different videos, in my Post Malone Circles video, as well as a random video I did way back in 2018, where instead of wiping away the mouth, I wiped away the eyes. And the process I use is exactly the same. So if you want to check out that full video, it'll be down below. And that video will actually show you how you can use the clone stamp tool in Photoshop to be able to create this cutout here. You see, this is just a mask. And then we're going to track this part to the face by actually doing a little facial track like from earlier. So to do that, you just double click on the footage. You go ahead and just select your lips tool, place it over the face. You're gonna do facial track detailed features only. Go ahead and press play. And there we go, there's our face track. So we're gonna click P on our mouth plate layer, Alt click to link the position and drag it to mouth bottom like that. Click away. And then of course, all you need to do to, and if we drag here, you'll see it's linked, but it's a little offset. To fix that, it's simple. Just go to your transform here, change your anchor point, and just adjust it. You may need to change up your mask a tiny bit as well. So you have your wiped away mask, you have it tracked onto your face as such to actually get it to shoot off of the face. And of course, this is a straightforward angle to actually see it really shoot off and to use the elements properly, like in the Godzilla music video. You'd have to shoot at an angle. So I'm just going to Control D and duplicate our original footage, and I'm just going to rename this to mouth. We'll take that layer and we'll drag it all the way above everything else, so it's on the very top. Now we're going to only isolate the mouth here. So I'm going to just take my pen tool and I'm going to make a mask around the mouth. So now essentially what I have, if I hide the visibility of all the other layers, is that. It's literally just cut out of the mouth. And if you want, you can go into your masks here and we can even feather a bit. So take your feathering, put it up a tiny bit, soften it out a bit. So bring these all back. What you want to do now is we're going to make this a 3D layer. So enable this 3D cube switch, and that's just going to give us a little bit more transform options. So if I open up my transform now, you'll see this is without being a 3D layer. This is with being a 3D layer. Now we have all the X rotation, the orientation. You have another axes here, your Z axes, which we can move. And that allows you to literally shoot the mouth off. So all you need to do is at your starting position, create your keyframes. So toggle on all of these switches, move a few frames over. And if you want to avoid it kind of like wiping away like that, you can even just right click, go to time and freeze frame. So now this is going to be a permanent kind of mouth like that. It's not going to, the layer is not going to be moving. And now as we just move a few layers, let's kind of launch this at the camera. You can either click V, grab the Z axis and just shoot it. Or I mean, you can do it manually, grab the actual values, drag it to the negative. I'm just going to grab the axes and literally just shoot it at the camera. So it's going to look a little weird, but there you go. So bam, we've now shot the mouth off. And of course, the original was at an angle. I think this is pretty cool. It adds on to that wiped away features. And you don't have to just do this with the mouth. I talked about doing it with eyes. We've talked about tracking it. So there's a lot you can do with this. It's pretty interesting. If you want to add in maybe some of the like distortion that they did with theirs, it's actually a good segue into where we're going to talk about shooting fire out of your mouth and any of the other elements that they used in the video. FootageCrate.com, they have some great free ones that you can use. All you need to search, let's just search for maybe like Shockwave. Of course, Video Copilot has their own shockwaves. Check out some of the resources below. It may be able to help you guys. You're ultimately just looking for some sort of shockwave dust trail thing. They have torch flames, sideways flamethrower. This is going to be perfect for our next effect, shooting flame out of the mouth. So we'll save that while we're at it. So once some of those assets have downloaded, just drag them into your project. And let's go ahead and just kind of make this look normal. We're going to place this in the layer below the mouth. And we're going to click S on the smoke and just kind of scale it down. You can put it on overlay, soft light. I think overlay looks good to kind of match the lighting. Again, you guys can use your assets however you like, change your blending modes, try out different ones, try and get a look that you ultimately like in the end. All right, fire coming out of somebody's mouth. This is a pretty easy one. We just showed you how to get the assets. Again, you guys can use any different one. You can even Google it, find your own. It's very easy. So we're gonna go ahead and create a new composition here. And I just quickly took a little recording and here we're at. So let's go ahead and start from scratch here. First off, step one, you always get rid of the green screen. You don't have to do this with the green screen in the back. I just shot what I literally had in front of me. So here is our green screen footage. We're going to take that free flame asset that we just downloaded from Footage Crate, or again, wherever you want to find it. So let's see, side flamethrower. I think this might be it. Here's what that's looking like. We just click and drag to reverse that. Click S to scale it down. We'll start it right about there. And we're going to create a mask on this layer. So select the fire layer. Grab your pen tool or click G and just create a simple little mask to bring up your mask and put that on subtract. If you want, you can even mask path, drag a bit. As we open up a little bit wider, you can adjust for that. Simple as that. It's just a quick second mask. Now to make this look a little more realistic, in terms of realistic lighting, we're gonna add a little bit of coloration just to kind of make it look like the source of the heat is really coming from here. So we're gonna select our original footage here, Control D to duplicate it, and we're going to rename this to red color. Now what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to grab my pen tool again. We're going to select this area and we're going to go ahead and color correct it. So let's go to curves, search for curves in your effects and presets, drag and drop the curves onto your red color layer. And then in your effect controls, we go to red and we're going to bump that up. And it's affecting our whole face here because we have all these other masks. We can delete them except for our blue mask. So now you see the red is only changing here. Cutout like, so let's open up that mask 3, feather it, and even add a little bit of After Effects glow onto there to kind of sell. And we're going to go ahead and just change a little bit of the radius on the glow. Now all you need to do is keyframe your mask path, drag along, and you can just adjust the mask however you need to make sure that it's not kind of floating out of the area. And if you even want to kind of combine in some like skin coloration or look, you can make it really look like it's coming from the throat. Control D on this. We'll rename this to throat red. And you can even just copy and paste the effects. So we'll select red color here. And we're going to grab the glow and the curves in our effect controls. Control C to copy. Select throat red. We'll hide all this in the effect controls. Control V. Now now all of our body is red, and all it takes is just a mask. So grab your pen tool. You can delete all these other masks so that there's no conflicting stuff going on here. Feather that out. Okay guys, so just to show you what this process looks like on some better looking footage, I actually reshot this, still did every single thing that I showed you on the whole process of adding the fire, but as you guys can see, we added a couple little things which I'm going to talk about here. So the main thing that we added was a few more assets on top. I talked about how you can find this fire asset on Footage Crate or something similar to that site. So I actually added some embers and some sparks from the site just to kind of make the flourish, the entrance of the fire a lot more dramatic. Another big thing which I added which helps to sell this scene a lot more is this kind of heat distortion. So if I click into the main composition here, you guys will see I have this layer here where I just added a mask, just dropped this little Red Giant Universe Heatwave plugin, and if you pay attention you can see the distortion if you're looking here. Other than that and the few things that I just mentioned to you, it's exactly the same. Okay guys, now on to the 3D portion of this tutorial. We're going to be showing you some interesting things. I'm going to be using Cinema 4D for the majority of this, but you guys can use any 3D software you are familiar with. We're going to be doing a lot of basic things that a lot of 3D softwares have. The main things that we are going to show you is this circle of knives or whatever kind of 3D object you want around your subject tracked into 3D space. We're going to show you how you can create your own floating 3D CDs, albums, whatever it is, and put it into your track footage. And then we're going to show you how to create something like 3D puke, 3D Lego puke, like in the music video. So it seems a little bit intimidating, especially if you guys are new to 3D, but I promise you it's not that hard. Follow along. We're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you guys. So first off, the number one thing we're going to need to do, which is the same first step for every single one of these looks that we're trying to accomplish, is we need to track the footage that we are working with. So here's the footage we're going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. So Alt click and just drag up. Right click, and we're going to bring this into After Effects. So replace with After Effects composition. All right, so we have the clip into After Effects. Like I said, the first step, which is going to be the same first step for every 3D look we're trying to do, is to track the footage. So to do that, you right click on the footage, you go to track and stabilize, and you track the camera. If this is grayed out, you may need to just double click on this until this option is available. Track and stabilize, track your camera, let After Effects do the work. It's going to get all the tracking information. All right, so our track is complete. If I scroll through here, you're going to see all of my little track points are looking good. Everything is correct. Make sure that whenever you are doing this, you're shooting with not too much motion blur, not too much shaky footage, because if your track isn't clean, if it isn't clear, if it isn't crisp, whenever you put your 3D assets in, they're going to be jiggling all over and it's not going to look realistic. If there is a tiny bit of bounce or movement in your shot, later on we'll show you how to stabilize everything to make it look smooth. But for now, what you need to do is go to your effect controls and click Create Camera. Now select your main footage here, select the 3D camera tracker effect once more, and we're going to choose the position where we're going to want to track. I'm just going to use my shirt here, right click on this bullseye and click Create Solid. And then I'm going to open up the solids options here, and we're going to just kind of change the orientation so that we have a general reference of where I am standing in the shot. So that's fine. The next step here is we're going to go up to File, Export, in Maxon Cinema 4D Exporter. Again, I mentioned I'm going to be using Cinema 4D. We're not going to be doing too much complex things in Cinema 4D, so if you use 3ds Max, if you use Blender, if you're familiar with that, you probably will be able to follow along if you understand these concepts very well. Maxon Cinema 4D Exporter, and the reason for doing this is we're bringing this 3D tracking information into our 3D software. That's the only purpose of doing this. So we're going to go ahead and just name this to Tutorial Knives. Here we are in Cinema 4D. I'm just going to quickly move myself over because our main options are going to be over here. All right, so step number one, like I said, we're going to want to file, open, and find that After Effects C4D file that we just saved. So here it is, tutorial knives track. Go ahead and open that up. Now what you're going to see here, if we just click play, this is the exact track in 3D space from After Effects. So it took that tracking information and it's brought it into After Effects here. So if you want a better visual representation of this, in the top right in your little object menu here, you can open up this null, and inside you'll see this is our 3D camera tracker from After Effects. This is the track solid that we made. So this is where I am in the shot. And if you guys even want to see this better, you can click off of this little camera object target here. Just zoom out. You can use these tools if you're new to C4D, or just the mouse wheel. Use your rotation, your move. Click play, you'll even see the camera moving in 3D space. So if I was in a bird's eye view, whenever this shot was taken, this is the exact camera movement. You can see the little jips from the moving forward. If you want to go back to that camera view, you just click back on this target. So keep this in mind. This is a big thing because we're going to click off the target when we want to put things in the scene. You don't want to be in your camera view, so you don't want to mess up the keyframes. When you want to actually see what it'll look like through the camera, then you click to your target and you see what it'll look like tracked into place. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, don't worry, we're going to make it a lot more simple moving forward. So you have your 3D tracking information in your 3D software. The next is to get your asset or make your asset. So if you guys know how to sculpt in your 3D software, a knife is something that could easily be made. I'm not going to sculpt it myself. I'm just going to go onto the internet and find a 3D knife model. All right, so here is the knife that I used, this polished knife PBR. I'll leave a link down below. I'm pretty sure let's see, it was free, so there you go. There are paid ones. There's a bunch of free ones. You don't have to use Turbo Squid. If you just search free knife 3D model, what you want to be looking for is the formats available. If it's available for Cinema 4D project file or whatever project file that corresponds with your 3D software, always go for that first. But if not, you always want to download an FBX or an OBJ. So go ahead and click download on this. I made a giant folder just for everything to do with this tutorial here. So if I go over to my knife folder here where I saved the actual 3D model, you can see I have my knife FBX and a folder with my textures so I can map everything correctly. So let's show you how to do that. Grab your FBX and just drag it into Cinema 4D like this. If you don't want to drag it, you can always file, merge objects, and find it. And what that did is it just opened up a new project with only our knife. So now let's design the look of that circular knife thing, and then we'll take it into our shot. You can switch to the other project file just by holding V on your keyboard. Go to projects and still holding V. So we can switch back and forth. So let's work on our knife project. So with our knife here, let's first worry about actually texturing this. So to do that, we're going to open up that folder that has our textures, and let's go ahead and check these out. So you'll see base color, black, or if you want the wooden handle, and then you also have a normal, you also have a roughness map, a diffuse, a specular, metallic. If you guys are new to 3D, you probably have no idea what that even means. No worries, we're going to go ahead and create a new material. So I'm going to be working with the Octane live viewer render engine for this. You guys don't have to use Octane. You can follow along and just do it with the default render, or maybe use Redshift, maybe use Arnold. Those are two other kind of 3D renderers which you can have as a third party kind of thing. I like Octane because you can just kind of drop this thing and drop this live viewer, fire it up, and you have this kind of live render view here. But again, if you're just doing with a physical, normal, vanilla Cinema 4D, you can just double click into the texture here, start loading in the maps like I'm about to. I'm using Octane, so I'm going to go to Create, Shader, C4D Octane Material. I'll double click on this material here, and we can drag it onto the knife just so everything we do, we start to see the changes. And for this texture in particular, I'm actually going to change the material type from diffuse to metallic because I want it to have this shiny, reflective kind of metal look to it. Now let's start loading in the texture map. So you can go through here, diffuse. You see this is where you load your texture in. Just click these three dots. It'll open up. Make sure you go back to wherever your knife textures are. So knife FBX. Textures, and we're going to load this base color texture here into the diffuse. So go ahead and do that. Next, let's go to the specular here. Open up these three dots and load in the specular. So spec gloss, knife specular, click that, open it. Now we can see our knife. So we're starting to get there. Next, let's go to the normal load in the normal map that we have here. It also has roughness. So whatever corresponding layers that are available here, we can go to roughness. You can load those all in just like that. And now if I zoom in here, you're going to see our knife is starting to look pretty good. If you want to change anything, you can just pop into your texture, check out the values. But for now, for what we're doing, this is going to be an okay look for our knife. Now our job is to get this in a circle and then take that circle of knives and put it in our track scene. So let's go ahead and talk. So let's talk about how we're going to accomplish that. So instead of Control C, Control V, duplicating the knives and painfully placing them in a perfect circle, what we're going to do is use this basic little 3D tool here. It's under MoGraph. So click MoGraph. We're going to use a cloner. So select that. And you'll see in our object menu, the cloner is now here. To actually use that cloner, select this knife object, click and drag. You see how it's left arrow, down arrow. You want to make it a down arrow and then release. Now the knife is a child of the cloner and the cloner is taking effect. So you'll see it's now cloned our knife. We now have 3 of them. So let's click on our cloner and we can change how this is going to be cloned and we can put it in the shape that we want. In the bottom right here, you see our options through our cloner. You can go through coordinates. This is basically where it's positioned. Basic, don't need to worry about that. Object, this is what we're mainly going to work out of. Transform, we're going to use this a little bit as well. And then effectors. We have our mode here. We can change this mode from linear to object. And now what it's saying is we're going to clone these in the shape of an object, but you're going to need to tell us what object you want first. We're going to want this in a sphere, a circular sphere of knives. If you want it a different object, you guys can create a different object. So we're going to create a sphere. Just click and hold on this cube, select sphere. And then let's go ahead and just position this here. So select our cloner again. You see under object, this kind of blank tag here. Just click the sphere object, click and drag it into there. There you go. We now have this kind of pinwheel of knives because it's cloning our knife object into this sphere. So this I think actually looks really cool and you can do a lot with cloners, but we're going to talk about how to get our specific shape we want. Select the cloner. For now, let's just put it on random. And we're going to go to transform because this is how we can change the look of how the clones are behaving. There's also this up vector. It's set to none right now. Let's select that. You guys want to click through this and you're going to see it's going to align this depending on what axes you want it to. So positive Y, negative Y. This is going to come in handy. Let's first go to transform. We'll keep it on positive Y for now. Go to transform and you see these options here. Position X, Y. You see if I click and change that, we're doing a bunch of crazy things. This is your scale X and Y if you want to kind of see what that looks like. So we're doing a bunch of craziness. And this is our rotation X and Y. For now, we're only going to worry about our rotation. And before we do that, I forgot one thing in object. Our distribution, right now it's distributing from the vertex. Let's put that on edge. And now we actually have a sphere, little sphere ball. So the knives are kind of compact right now. It's literally just looking like blades. So let's kind of pull them away from the sphere. So you see our Z here, click and just kind of pull that. So I'm just taking my mouse, putting it up. I put it to around 361. Now we actually have this kind of cage of knives around our sphere. We can even move in. You'll see what that looks like from the inside. So you'll see the handles are making up the cage. The blades are on the outside. Again, looks really cool. You guys can do a lot with this, but we want the blades to be pointing inward. To do that, let's change our rotation now. And you're going to kind of have to mess around with it. We'll change the H rotation, and there we go. So now we kind of like a coronavirus-shaped knives. You'll see what that is looking like. Spread that out more. Click and drag my Z. And now we have a bunch of knives facing the circle. And we'll zoom in here. And again, with the rotation, these are kind of upside down. So there we go. I just put up the piece to 260. So if you want to copy those values, now all of the knives are pointing in directly towards the sphere. Now, there's a crazy amount of knives here. Let's go back to object and remember how our distribution is changed to edge. Well, that is corresponding to the actual sphere. It's talking about the edges of the sphere object. If you want to change that, if we click on our sphere and we go to object here, you'll see the segments. If we just start clicking that down, you're going to start to see that our knives are starting to kind of lower because we're lowering how many segments are in that sphere. So now this is a little bit more manageable. And again, if you want to spread it out more, you can click on your cloner and then go to your transform again, put up the Z. So it's really up to you, but that really is about it. If you want to, you guys can always experiment with the different values. You can create different looking shapes. This is just how I did it. My goal isn't just to show you how I did one exact thing or how somebody else did one exact thing. My goal is just to show you the different tools on how you yourself could accomplish this. You can customize it however you like, but for now, this is looking like a good knife sphere. So I like the sphere, but I don't want it to be showing in our scene. So in our object menu, we can keep it here. We're not going to disable it. We're not going to delete it. We're just going to double click these two dots so it's not showing in the render or the edit. So it's technically there, but it's invisible. If you select the sphere, you can change the transform. You can grab the rotation. One thing I did, just a quick little mention before we put this in our track footage, is if you want a look where the knives are kind of going towards somebody, if we click our cloner, again, our transform, you can keyframe all these values just like in Adobe Premiere and After Effects. So say this is our Z, this is what's moving them in and out. If I keyframe that at our beginning position, we click, make that a red dot, drag for however long you want, maybe 40 frames, and we kind of make those inside, and then you click again to activate the keyframe. What you'll see is here's our keyframe. So if we click play, there you go. So you can create animations like that. You can do that with any of the values. Cool thing to know when it comes to customizing your stuff that you're creating with this. So this is all good to go. We're going to click select everything, Control C to copy, and then hold down V, and let's plot back into our track comp here. We'll refire this up. So again, this is our camera tracking. This is so that we can have everything match perfectly. So pause this, click in your object menu, Control V to paste. So now this is going to look crazy, and this is where we kind of need to finesse everything, place it exactly where we need it. So this is why we use this track solid. If you could have just exported the camera without a track solid, but the track solid's purpose is to show us where in 3D space we're going to be putting this stuff. So first step first, before you go crazy, you start moving everything, always click off your camera. This is checked, click off of it. Now we can freely move around, do anything, change things without our camera keyframes being messed up. So again, hold shift, select all of this, and then we'll just take our Z value and just move it to where this green target is. You're going to need to use your controls here, get familiar with everything, and position that exactly where you need it around the green square. Now let's click back to our camera. This is what it's going to look like in the camera view. So now, as you see, we play it, and the circle is completely tracked onto that sphere. So we're getting there. For some reason, our knives are just like very black, but we're going to fix that in a little bit. So let's double click on our texture. Let's go ahead and just reload our maps because for some reason they kind of get lost around. See, they all turn black. So let's reload our normal here, and let's see, let's reload. I think that's it. So we're good to go. Our knives are looking normal. We'll play that, and you'll see with our reflection, they're even starting to reflect the green target here. And we're going to talk a lot about that because the reflection and trying to match the environment with what we're bringing in is a huge part into making this look as realistic as possible. So I'm going to give you guys another huge tip. Instead of going about this blind, what you can do is make sure that your camera is enabled. So it's checked. You can press play to check and see if you are in the camera view. You want to file, save. Let's save as tutorial knives tracked. That's fine. So file, save. You can hop back into After Effects here, find where that Cinema 4D project file is, so tutorial knives, so click, drag that into your actual scene. And now with that placed in your actual scene, you'll see in a few seconds it'll pop up. Make sure this is in a layer above, and you're gonna see the outline of what you are creating in 3D space. So this is a great way to make sure that your track is correct. If we turn this on and off, you'll see that these targets are lined up. You can click play, and you can kind of see a basic little render of what these knives will look like. And this is key because you can do real-time changes. So you see how the circle looks here. Obviously, it's too small. We need it bigger. So all you need to do is say, okay, I need to make it bigger. Pop into Cinema 4D. You can select your cloner here. Go to your transform, take your Z, and just drag that up. And then all you have to do is file, save, pop into After Effects, check it out, a few seconds, there you go. So that's how you can kind of check and see when you need to make the changes. Check with the actual footage. I know you guys are probably writing comments right now that you can put a background layer in Cinema 4D of actual moving footage or just like a reference footage. In my opinion, I think this is easiest, but of course, it's whatever you guys are comfortable with. Playing through here, you'll see how the knives are actually moving. You'll see that it's tracked correctly. Now, when it comes to actually designing the look of the knives, there's one more step that we need to do. First off, we can uncheck this green track solid. So this green little check here, just click that. We don't need that once we have the thing positioned where we want. Now these knives are looking good, but they're looking a little like plastic knives. They're not looking like dangerous metal. And I'll show you my first render here where I did this without adding this next step I'm about to tell you. You can see it looks kind of plastic. It looks a little chintzy. Now here's the newer version, and it doesn't look completely photorealistic, but it does look a lot better. There's a lot more reflections. To add in those reflections, you're going to need an HDRI map. There's a few ways you can go about doing this. You can just find a random one that's similar to your scene and drop it in there like what I did. Or you can buy some fancy equipment, I think $300, where you can 3D scan your scene and create your own custom HDRI maps wherever you're at. So that is the best way. If you have your HDRI map from the exact scene, if I had 3D scanned that area to get the HDRI map, then the exact lighting of my scene could be replicated in 3D. And it would look a lot more realistic, but unfortunately, I don't own one of those. I'm probably gonna buy one soon to help improve the quality of the 3D content I put out, but we're gonna just do a little custom one that's similar to our scene. So to do that, in Octane, I just go to Objects, HDRI Environment. We load it here. Everything's going to turn dark. Here's our Octane sky. It has this little HDRI tag. Select that. And in here is just an image texture. So we need to load our HDRI into here. Click the image texture. You'll see it says file name .hdr. Now, if you just go and look up HDRI, check it out, HDRI Haven, HDRI Maps, you can find a bunch of these for free. You'll see what those kind of look like, skies. Find one that best matches the lighting, time of day. I'm gonna go ahead and just click my 3 dots here, and I'm gonna find that HDRI. And now it's loaded in. So now you'll see, if I kind of zoom in here, you'll see that these trees are being reflected in the actual blades of the knives, and it's just making them look a lot more realistic. You can actually rotate the HDRI if you want to kind of change the reflections. Select the Octane sky, and in our environment tag, you'll see our image texture that I was talking about. Click into there. You guys can change the power. It's kind of like the brightness. Another great tip, change your type here. If you don't want all the green in the reflection, you can change that from normal to float. And that's just going to keep the reflections, but keep them black and white. And I think for the knives, this actually works pretty well. So if I zoom, here's what that looks like. You can even see closely some like trees in the reflection of the hilt. So we have this HDRI in here, but when I render, I don't want to have this weird image in the background. To make sure this is invisible, technically it is, but what you need to do is open up your Octane settings or your project settings and slide down here to where it says alpha channel, and we're gonna check that. And you'll see it goes away, but we still have our reflections. I'm also gonna uncheck keep environment. And while we're here, let's go ahead and just set these, get them out of the way. You guys can change off direct lighting, but I'm just gonna keep it because we're not doing anything crazy. Take your samples from 128, put them close to 1,000. I've been keeping them at like 840. I think that's fine. That'll just make the quality of your render a lot better. It's not gonna take too long. I think it takes me like 5 minutes to actually render out this full scene. So it's nothing crazy, and that's good. Just important thing is make sure your alpha channel is checked. Of course, this is what it's gonna look like if it's not, and make sure your samples are up. Okay, and that is about it. So if you guys like the look of it, file, save, pop into After Effects. You always wanna check out what that's looking like. When you are ready to render, you pop into Cinema 4D. Last thing, let's add a little bit of lighting here just so it's not dark. So I'm just gonna go to Objects, Lights. You can add a daylight. I'm going to add an area light. So we don't want the light blocking the camera, so we'll click on the light tag. Visibility, see camera visibility, turn that off, and you'll see this is what it looks like, light on, light off. So you can tell from that knife. So when you're ready to render, come up to your settings, click this. The great thing about doing this in After Effects and Cinema 4D is since we brought in that After Effects camera with the After Effects track solid, it completely just copy and pasted all of our settings here. So our width and height, we don't have to touch it. Frames, just put that on all frames. That's fine. Of course, change the renderer to whatever renderer you're using. So I'm using Octane. If I kept it on standard, all the Octane stuff, the look of it wouldn't render. It would just look like this when it's rendered. So I'm going to change my renderer to Octane right there. Now we go to save, and this is where you want to save it. So click these three dots, and let's go back to our main folder, Godzilla effects. And anytime I do a render, you'll see I have a folder, knife renders. This is what it's going to look like. There's a bunch of images, and as you scroll, you'll see it's kind of going in and out. So let's right click, make a new folder. So folder, tutorial, knife renders, and double click into that folder and just name it something. So I just name it knife, and whenever it renders, it'll say knife 0, knife 1 every frame. So save it. Format, I like to just do TIFF, PSD layers. This is a big one. Make sure alpha channel is checked on here as well as in your Octane settings. So now you can go ahead and click this button and it will begin rendering. So check it out. And we're going to use that exact strategy here that we just did to create this, to create our other 3D things. So the way that we render, set it up, the way we bring in the tracking info, everything's going to stay the same except for how we design what 3D thing is going on. So familiarize yourself with this process, rewind it. If it's tricky, leave questions in the comments if you're stuck. I'll try my hardest to help out. People in the comments are always helping each other out. So if you're stuck, please don't. I've already rendered this out previously, so I'm not going to render it, but you can even right click and show file in Explorer, and you'll see now they're rendering out. So once that's done, what you want to do is you hop into After Effects, you go to your project bin here, you right click and you go to import multiple files. Now you go to where you rendered everything. So I did moving knife renders. This is where we did it. So here's everything rendered out. You can see all 140 frames. All you have to do is select the first picture. You don't have to highlight all of them. Make sure TIFF sequence is checked. Import as footage, import. And then you just click OK, and then you click done. Now it opens up. Now it creates this for you. Drop it in there and check it out. You got your knives in your scene. All right, so this is perfect. Now the only issue here is you'll see that there's some of these that are in the background kind of peeking through. Now there's two ways to fix this. You guys can either go back and render a kind of depth pass, and depending on what renderer you are using, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Or what you can do is you can literally just mask it. Masking it for this was not that hard. I think it maybe took 5-10 minutes. A little bit annoying, but you got to do what you got to do. One other thing, you'll see that if I play this, it's not tracked in. It's kind of shaky, and the duration isn't right. As you can see in my project bin, frame rate, it's 30, but this footage is 23.978. So make sure the frame rates are corresponding. But if you just run into this issue where this is 30, but you did it all correct, you can just right click, interpret footage, main, and we'll just interpret this as 23.976. Click OK. And now you can just drag it out. Now it's properly tracked. There's a little bit of jiggling from the handheld movement, but to fix that, so say you want to do an After Effects, we right click, pre-comp this. You want to add a warp stabilizer, and this will take away your shakiness if it is a little bit of handheld going on. This will make it smooth. So just drop your warp stabilizer onto there. Again, you can do this in Adobe Premiere with a dynamic link. So this is stabilizing and should be good to go. So play that out. So our warp stabilizer is complete. So after that, we've completed our first 3D scene with our knives step by step. And again, we're gonna skip a little bit of these steps here because I showed you the workflow from getting the footage into C4D to tracking it to putting what 3D thing you want into the track space, checking it in After Effects, all the way to rendering, color grading, stabilizing. That's all going to stay the same. The only thing we're going to change in that process that I just showed you is instead of making a circle of knives, now we're going to make 3D puke, or we're going to make 3D blood. And we're going to take that same workflow, and now we're going to take the 3D puke or the 3D blood and put it in front of our camera. All right, guys, now onto the puke, the Lego puke. And mine is very different from the actual original music video. I added a lot more actual slime, actual puke, and less Legos. But we're going to talk about how you guys can create these Legos, how we can add the physics, the dynamics, have it hitting the ground, how we can add in our shadows. And if you actually look closely, you'll see that I actually messed up because the puke kind of starts to float away, and it makes it look like it's kind of hovering over the ground. So I'm going to go back and fix that. But in the time being, we'll talk about all the challenges you're going to face, how to create this look, how to create these simulations. And again, it's not as difficult as it may look, but I will say that you will need a plugin to create a fluid simulation like this. I'm using RealFlow for Cinema 4D. Of course, depending on what 3D software you're using, you guys can look into different fluid simulations. There's Xparticles, which is on the more expensive end, and on the absolute cheap end, there's Houdini Apprentice version, where obviously a completely different software, a little bit more complicated. But if you want something free and you want to create a fluid simulation, then you can use Houdini. Again, RealFlow works for Cinema 4D, so I recommend RealFlow, and I'm going to be using RealFlow for this and for talking a little bit later how to create custom blood spatters. But anyways, we're going to start the exact same way. My first time shooting this, if we just take a look at the footage, I did it like this. And obviously, I would have to kind of really finesse everything. I'd have to do a lot more masking, and I would have to make it really look like it's coming out of one exact point. The benefit of shooting it like this, where you reel over, and you'll see in the music video, they do the same thing. They completely reel over and have his head kind of all the way at waist length, is now you can just create a mask here. You don't have to make it look like anything's coming out of the mouth. You can just make it look like things are falling out, and it's a lot easier to pull it off this way. It's a lot simpler. It's going to make your life easier. So if you're trying to do this, don't just try and make stuff shoot out of your mouth. Be smart about it, and I think this is the best possible way. So right click, track and stabilize, track your camera. Camera is tracked. We're gonna go ahead and create our camera. You'll see it says no depth, so that's fine. Again, we're not moving forward. And we're going to, you see this kind of triangle bullseye here. We're going to right click, create our solid, select that solid, open up its transform options. You see our orientation. We're gonna orient it so that it's flat. So we're selecting the general area of where this puke is going to land. I'm even going to kind of change it. We'll grab the y-axis, try and put it in front, play that out to see what it's looking like. So we're looking like we're puking onto this 3D track solid. Once you do that, you go to File, Export, Cinema 4D Exporter, click OK. And we go into Cinema 4D, we file, we open, and we open up what we just saved. So tutorial puke comp, and again, here we are. Fire up Octane or whatever render to view, play it out, and you can see, again, let's open up that null, click off here. You can see this is what the camera is looking like in the hands of my girlfriend who was filming this. This is the shakiness. Now let's create 3D puke and 3D Legos. So let's start with the Legos. So just like with the knives, you can either create your own Lego or do it the lazy way. We're just going to find Legos on the internet. So I bought Lego food for $6 and Lego brick set for $10. So if you guys are interested, links to those will be below. Again, you don't have to use the exact ones. There's a bunch of different ones like this if you look up Lego food. So this Lego piece project file here, there's actually a Cinema 4D project file for that. So you can just double click on that once you've downloaded it. Make sure you just download the Cinema 4D. And also there's a lot of plugins on the internet of things where you can just click and make your own Legos. I'm pretty sure this project file was using one of those plugins. So if you just Google search whatever 3D software you're using, Lego plugin, there's a lot out there. There might be a lot of free stuff, but we don't really need that. What I need is this right here, these connect the actual object of the Legos. In this project file, we'll just delete all the sky, the camera. This is help if you want to actually like build your own or something. We'll delete that. I need these right here. So I'm going to open this up. This connect object here. I'm going to right click and I'm just going to click current state to object, and it makes this, and this is what I want. And you can do that for all the different ones. This is 2x5, 2x7. You can use the textures they have. Just drop red, blue. Now I did this for all of them. So we have our Lego pieces, and our goal is to make them be puked. Think about what we're actually going to need to accomplish. You guys can look at the footage of my tutorial. You can look at the music video, the Godzilla music video. Our solution for that, again, you guys can keyframe it all, make it drop, but it's not going to be that easy. So similar to how we clone the knives for the knife circle, we're going to emit the Legos. So to create that emission, and essentially what it is emitter is just particles being fired into one direction. You can choose what the particle is. In this case, we're going to make the particles these Lego blocks. Simulate tab here, go to particles, and you'll see emitter. Go ahead and click that. Now we have this little emitter object. So you can press play, and this is what the emitter is doing. So this is the direction the particles are going. We're going to go ahead and change that around. So let's click our rotation tool, flip this around, grab tool, pull it up, rotation tool. So we want the particles to go down. Go to the beginning, press play. Perfect. We have our particles raining down on our Legos. Now let's turn those particles into Legos. First of all, let's give this some more distance. Now to do that, similar to the cloner, we need to make these pieces here children of the emitter. So click, select them all, and then just drag, see that down arrow, drop into the emitter. Now this is going to play, you're not going to see it. To actually see it be emitted, click the emitter and just click show objects. Now this will disappear and it's going to start raining bricks like that. And that's as simple as that. Now, all you really need to do is change around the settings until you get what you ultimately want. Another thing I want to mention is the way that these are going to turn out. You guys can actually click on your emitter here. Let's change some of these settings first. So your birth rate editor, this is basically going to say like fast, how many of these bricks it's doing. So if we put this all the way up to like 40, let's put it up to 30. Go to the beginning, you're gonna see like a tower of Legos come out. Lifetime, don't need to touch that. Speed, this is an important one because this is gonna be how fast the puke is coming out. The Legos are gonna be coming out. So you may need to tweak this number a little bit depending on your footage, but for now, let's just put it up to like 300. So we have that happening. Maybe put that up more. Let's maybe make it 600. And if you guys want to, this end scale variation, speed variation, lifetime variation, if you just put up these percentages, it's going to add a little bit more randomization to how these are dropping, so it won't be as uniform. The scales are going to be changed a little bit, the speeds are going to be changed, and that way it doesn't look like you're just kind of telling the computer to drop Legos. It looks a little bit more random, so that'll help for the pukey look, if that makes any sense. Click on emitter type. I put this on cone, and you don't want this to be a wide area because we want this to look like it's coming out of our mouth. So you can put this on 10 centimeters for both. Now it's kind of falling in a more uniform area, and they're all kind of facing up. So let's maybe just select some of these and we'll change the rotation so that some of these are kind of crooked. I'm trying to just like randomize them. Play. Now you'll see everything's looking a bit different. So you guys can really mess around with that. In terms of the spacing, you kind of just have to tweak it. Of course, you can maybe transform a bit. There you go. So pretty simple. It's like one tiny control, and you guys can probably just tweak around and get the basics of this pretty easy. Now, the next thing that we need to accomplish here is this is just going to fall to kingdom come. We need to actually create our floor here. We need to actually make the little plane of where this is going to hit the ground. So let's take this emitter, Control C. Let's hold down V and just pop into that project of the tracked composition. So this one, we already have a track solid down to where the floor should be, so we can just Control V to paste, and let's just position it now. So we'll click off our check, and this is all the way up there, so hold down Shift to select all of these to make sure that nothing gets left behind. And now we're going to try and just get this over to the track solid, kind of like that. So double click this, go back to frame 0, click in your camera, press play, and look, now you see the blocks are hitting our thing. So let's go back, and first of all, these blocks are way too big. In the coordinates, you see our X, Y, and Z for our scale. S is for scale. Let's make each of those 0.5. So we're gonna decrease the size by half. So you can just Control V, paste in that 0.5, and let's do that for everything. So click here, coordinates, scale. If we file save, and let's do the same thing, let's get our reference, pop into After Effects, and let's go ahead and just drag in the composition here. It should say tutorial puke comp. So let's see what the Legos are looking like. Press play, and they're actually just based off blindness. It's actually kind of coming in the right area because you'll see we want it to start like right here. But obviously it starts right away, so that's an issue. It's falling all the way down, so that's an issue. We need it to hit the ground. So there's a few issues we need to address here. So let's start with making it start where we want it to. So if we drag here, we want it to start right there is when I would start puking. If you see here this little time stamp, you'll see there's our time 017, and that's actually 17th frame. So this bottom left number is the frame. So on our 17th frame, that's when we want this emission to start. Go back into Cinema 4D, click on our emitter here, and remember the speed that we were talking about right here, how 600. First of all, let's put that at 400. And then let's go to the 17th frame. where we want it to start. Keyframe the visibility as well. So let's put it at 0 here. Move to our activation frame 17, so 100. Again, that's what happens if you don't click it in. Make sure it's red. Now we play it, and there we go. So now it's emitting at the frame we want. So if we file save, now you'll see it doesn't start puking until we want it to. Obviously, everything's still messed up. We still need to change a lot of things, but at least that problem is attended to. Now let's make it so that it starts bouncing off the ground. Go into Cinema 4D. We're going to create a plane here. So hold and click on your cube, create a plane shape. Let's click off our camera so we don't mess anything up. Now let's bring this plane over. And this is why we bring in these track solids, because this is giving us our reference for where the puke is going to land. So we'll place the plane right over that track solid like that. And we're going to go ahead and make this bigger. So click scale. So now we're going to add dynamics to this. So this way, when these Lego bricks hit this plane, they're not just going to pass through them like they are now. They're going to bounce off and react like it's a Lego being dropped on the floor. So you'll see right now it's passing through, but let's add the dynamics. And it's pretty easy. We're just going to add tags. So let's hold shift, click and select all these connects, which is our Lego objects. You can rename them to Lego if you want. Right click, simulation tags, rigid body. And let's go to the beginning. Now we're going to go to our plane here. And if you want, here, let's rename everything so no one's confused. We'll rename this to ground. Now we've added the rigid body to our Legos, and that's just telling the simulation these Legos now have physics. So if they interact with something that it's told to be a hard surface, it's going to bounce off it. So let's tell this to be a hard surface. Let's right click on the ground. Let's go to simulation and make that a collider body. And now let's just play and see how that looks. So now they're going to emit, they're going to emit, they're going to hit the ground, and they're not just going to pass through. And if you guys want, if you don't want plane to be visible in After Effects, because you're going to see that this plane is going to pop up and it's going to take a lot of viewing space away, as you can see. If you want that to just only be there but not visible, you select it, double click these dots so they're red. So technically it's still there. It's still going to react like it's a floor, but it's not visible. So there you go, as you can see. And we're going to make this a lot more realistic as we go. We're going to add shadows, so you can see if it's in the air, there'll be a shadow on the floor. And it's kind of a little bit too close, and again, they're too big. I can spend another 3 hours of video just explaining all the little tweaks that we add. It's going to be different for all the footage. So I'm not going to show you perfectly what to change. You guys are going to have to change it based on your footage, but I'm going to show you how to get the simulation. So say it's a little bit too close, so I need to move it close to the camera. Very simple. Anytime you're doing a simulation, I also recommend if you're going to move something around, always start at the first frame. Just click this button before you move anything, just so you don't mess anything up. Pop out of here. Grab the Z-axis. We'll move it a little bit closer, a little bit further out. And coordinates here. Let's make this like 0.8 for our emitter scale. And that's kind of like the master scale for all the Legos. That'll just make them a bit smaller. All right, so that is the simple basics. If you want to add in the Lego food like I did, what I did was I just Control-C, Control-V to copy and paste this emitter. I deleted all of these Legos in that pasted emitter. Let's rename this to food emitter. And then I brought in the Lego food FBX. As you can see, I just textured all of these just by creating like Cinema 4D glossy materials, as you guys can see. Put them all into place and then drop them into the emitter and then just place that emitter over top of the other emitter. That way you can get the food. The only thing I need to show you here is how to add the liquid. Again, there's going to be a lot of tweaking on your end. It's going to look different. You need to position it. Just kind of imagine that it starts here, and we're going to make a mask later on. So it doesn't matter if it's kind of leaking over the area. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll make a mask later on and fix everything. But add in the dynamics, position it where you need, make the emitter, customize everything how you want it. But let me take you through the basics. It's not that difficult. So what we're going to do here, let's click off of this. And you can do this in another project and then drop it on your target later if you want, if you find it easier. I'm just going to do it all in this composition. So when it comes to RealFlow, once you've downloaded the plugin, you're going to see if I click here, I can just click this scene button. It's going to kind of set this up for me. Now, let's do the same thing we've been doing with everything. Let's position this scene target over top of where we're doing everything. This is exactly the same to how we created the emitter for the Legos. We're gonna go to Real Flow and then just create a circle emitter. And you're gonna just set it up the same. You can actually find where you placed your original emitter, and you can match up the circle emitter to where your Lego emitter is. So find the positioning of your Lego emitter and place your circle emitter. You're also gonna wanna make that smaller because it's going to be coming out of your mouth. It's not going to be like a giant valve of water opening. So this is what our liquid emission is looking like. You'll see these little raindrops dropping. Now we're going to customize this. So select fluid here, and here's where you can change a lot. And again, I recommend if you want to fully customize depending on what type of fluid you're making, there's a lot of tutorials where you're going to really get in depth with the customization, or you guys can mess around with these a lot. But what I did to make it more slime-like, not watery, I made this density 600. And again, you can change a bunch of these. You can experiment. It's really up to you. Now let's do the same thing at this emission here so that it starts when the Lego starts. So that's frame 17. You see our speed, keyframe that, move to 16, make it 0, keyframe it. So you should have 0 particles. Bam, flip the switch, just like that. We got the particles coming down at frame number 17. Now we need to do the same thing. It's literally the exact same thing that we did with the Legos. We need to add the dynamics. We need to make these particles hit the floor. We don't need it to pass through it. I'm just gonna make another plane, and this one will be the Real Flow plane. So we'll name this Real Flow plane. And we're gonna place this in the exact same area here. So, and then what we're going to do is this time we're going to add the Real Flow dynamics tag, and it's the same as like the collider object, but for Real Flow. So right click, instead of going to simulation, you go to Real Flow. Right here, Real Flow tags, collider. And again, if you want to change your friction, your bounce, you can, but let's just test it and see if these particles are now hitting the plane, and perfect. So that's what we want. But next essential step really is actually adding the liquid so you can see what it's going to look like and making the liquid. So to do that, you go to Real Flow, you click Measure, and then it auto pops this up. All you need to do is click blocking it, but right there, Build Mesh, click that. And for some reason, the mesh is like all the way down here. So let's just select it and position it to be where we need it to. So here it comes, toothpaste basically right now. Hits our plane and it stops. Let's customize the look of this. We're going to click on Measure, Resolution. You can keep that low. Bump your radius up. And again, don't put it up too much. You need to really experiment with this, because sometimes this is where it can get difficult, because you're not going to see this just by file saving and popping over. Since it's a plugin, my initial run, I made this way too thick on the radius, and it literally looked like this giant like slime coming out of my face. So again, this is going to be different depending on your footage, how you shot it. Find one that works. If you need to do like a little testing phase, what you can do is you can play out the simulation here, and instead of rendering the whole animation, having to wait, just go to output, just render like one frame and see how it lines up, if you know what I mean. Now for the actual slime, for the texture of it, right now it just looks like brick. We're gonna go to Create, Shader, C4D Octane, Material, and we're gonna change this material from diffuse to specular. Now all we're gonna really do here is the transmission. Let's go ahead and just add a RGB spectrum. To do that, click this little triangle, go to Effects, go to Cinema 4D Octane, and go to RGB spectrum. Click into there, and now we can change the color. So make it kind of like greenish, pukish yellow. So if you drop it on there, here's what that looks like. It's specular, so it's kind of like glass. We want to mix of that. So we want it to be like glossy, paint-like, but also a little bit like slime see-through. So to find the perfect mix, instead of just doing this, let's Control Z. We're gonna make another texture. So shader, material. Now on this one, we're gonna make this one a glossy, and then let's just change to the diffuse color. So we'll go make this one even a little more yellow, like that. So now we have old Shrek boy here, and we got glassy Shrek. Now let's mix those. Create, shader, octane, octane mix. Double click that. drop in our Shrek texture, drop in our glass texture, and now we have puke. And of course, you guys can change however you want. If that's too see-through, you guys can put it more towards the glossy to the right. If it's too whatever, you guys can customize. It's all up to you. You guys can put image textures of like weird puke chunks if you want. So let's turn our Legos back on. So we have our emitter, it's X'd. Check that back on. Play it, and we'll see how everything works together. So we have Legos, we have vomit. The Legos are falling a lot faster than the vomit, so let's fix that. Click our emitter, and our speed here, you'll see the keyframe. Drag it back. We had it at 400. Let's put it at, I think even 200 would be good. Make sure that's red. So I'm actually just going to go to my original comp here just to kind of save some time so that I'm not explaining all the little changes of values for hours on end. So this is the ultimate, this is the composition that I ultimately used in my final product. You can see it's a lot more contained in terms of the area. Everything, again, it just took a lot of experimentation, a lot of changing the values, and I can't just show you mine because it's going to be different for your footage unless you completely replicate the footage. So, and the last thing I need to show you before rendering, a very, very important step, is adding a shadow catcher. So since this is going to be bouncing off the ground, all these pieces here, we need to add shadows onto that or it's not going to look realistic. To add these shadows, it's actually really easy. So you'll see that we have these planes here that we made earlier, and they're just hidden so that they're not in the renders, but we still have things reacting with them. So this plane right here, show it. It looks red, right? This is what it normally looked like. This is what the Legos are bouncing off of. Let's turn that into a shadow catching plane. So create shader, C4D Octane. All I need to do is go down to common, click shadow catcher, the end. Drag that onto your plane. See, even in my Octane render here, if I zoom in, you'll see this now has shadows. It's kind of hard to see. Now only the shadows are showing, and you guys can render like normal. Once you have that ready, let's get this ready for export. We're going to do similar to the knives. Go to your Octane settings, samples, put them up to close to 1,000. I did 730. Turn on alpha shadows, or turn on alpha channel. Very, very important. Make sure your alpha channel is checked. Turn off keep environment. You guys can add lighting. Here, I'll show you my lighting setup for this. Similar to what I did with the knives. I got a light here, a light there. Make sure everything's looking perfect for your standards. Now, in terms of settings, put it on Octane Renderer, save. Again, we're going to make another folder here. Just make a folder named Puke Renders or whatever renders. Do the same with the knives. If I'm going too quick here, rewind to the knives where I fully talked about it. Check your alpha channel. Make sure it's on all frames, and you're good to go. You don't have to add onto the meshers. I think this will render out with Octane, but if not, whatever render you're using, like sometimes when you're doing a plugin, sometimes when you're using a plugin on this, you may need to right-click on the mesher and go to C4D Octane tags, or here's Arnold tags, or Redshift tags. Just add an Octane object tag. Now, once you're done rendering, drop that into After Effects. Make sure everything's lined up. Make sure everything is proper, everything's tracked correctly, and go about masking. And again, this is why I told you at the very beginning, if you're reeling over as opposed to trying to have it shoot out of your mouth, it's going to be a lot easier to pull this off. Just simple masks like this. That's the easy part. The harder part is masking your legs out so that it's not really messing with that. If you want, you could even put 3D like leg-like objects there so that the slime will react like it splashes up against it. That's an option, but I didn't do it. That is the bulk of the difficult stuff. So if you made it this far, congratulations. The rest is going to be very easy. We just need to show you how to make the CDs, walking Godzillas, and floating blood. All right, guys, so let's talk about how to add in our walking Godzilla model. Let's go ahead and right-click on our footage, track and stabilize, track the camera as usual. So we can go to our effect controls here, click create camera, and our 3D camera tracker will pop up. Let's also select here, we can select in our effect controls the 3D camera tracker. And let's just kind of put a rough area for where we want this Godzilla. So, and then maybe one over here. So these are going to be our reference points. So let's go up to File, Export, Maxon Cinema 4D Exporter. Click OK here. Now, when it comes to actually finding the Godzilla model, you pop onto TurboSquid, CG Trader, you guys can search for Godzilla, and 90% of the time, it's going to be a little tricky to find the exact model here. So shout out to this guy here, Hakan. He actually posted this on Sketchfab, and I'm just going to use this as an example, but this is a Blender model, rigged, animated, perfectly what we need just to show you the example. So you need to find a animated version of your monster, or you need to animate it yourself. If you want to animate the walk cycle yourself, it's not that difficult, but it is time consuming. Click download 3D model. I downloaded Blender, which is free, and it's super quick to install. It takes like 5 seconds to install Blender. I just went file, open this up in Blender. As if you click play down here, you can see what it's looking like. Then what I did is I just went to file, export, and FBX. And you don't really have to mess with these, just name it. Make sure that bake animation is checked. So let's bring in our tracked composition here. Open up our Godzilla tracked that we just exported from Blender, the FBX. So here's what that's looking like. Double click into there. I'm gonna change this to a glossy material. And then in my diffuse, we can actually bring up the textures that came along with this model here. Drop the skin texture into the diffuse. You can drag it onto Godzilla here. You can drag the normal map onto there. And it's looking pretty good. Select all of these in the top right. Control C to copy. And we're gonna hold down V and go to our add Godzilla comp. And then select our object bin again, Control V to paste. Let's pop out of our camera so we can position this where we want. And this is way too big for what we're going for. So we're gonna hold down Shift and just select the armature and the circle here. So this is everything making up our Godzilla model. We're gonna hold down Alt and click G just to put that in a null so we can transform it without messing anything up. We'll just name this Godzilla. And we're actually just gonna go to coordinates. See how it says 1 here? Let's make this like 0.4 for everything. There you go. So the reason why we put it in a null is so that we're not scaling one thing and messing up the rig. If you put it in the null, it'll scale everything. So if we press play here, this should still be working fine and it's smaller. So that's how we can do that properly. This is still really big, maybe 0.1. So 0.1 for all of these. Control V to paste. It's looking a lot better. Let's maybe put this where we can see it. Here's what that looks like. Click back to your camera view. If you want to reference the size, you can just check these track solids off for now. File, save that, pop into After Effects, and let's go ahead and just drag that Cinema 4D project file. Once you've dragged in that file, you'll see what it's looking like in our scene. So let's try and line that up better. You'll see it's a little bit too high up here, and we're gonna grab our Godzilla null and just lower it. File save. Probably would have been a better idea to actually place these track solids on the ground. Now that should be okay, so let's just make it move forward with the walk cycle instead of pacing in place. So what we can do is we can just click this little auto keyframes button that's right next to my face. Click that at our starting position here, and then just drag to the end. And then with your null selected, you can grab this Z position and just kind of move it forward. Now let's see what that looks like. We'll press play. You see we made a keyframe of our Godzilla moving forward. All right, so now let's create a little plane for the ground so that we can create some realistic shadows. Hold down on this cube and click on plane. And let's click off our camera view for now. If you guys want, you can see how far you're really going. Grab this plane and we're gonna go and place it right at the feet of our Godzilla. A little bit longer. Now you can see the shadow that's being created here automatically. And we can add in some simple lighting here. So we'll click off this for now and we'll just add in a little object lights Octane area light. Make this ground a shadow catcher object. Very easy. We just go to shader, Cinema 4D Octane material, and then in here you just go to common, turn on shadow catcher and drop it down. Let's also go to our Octane settings here, turn on alpha channel, and now you'll see that this goes away. You turn off keep environment so that we can see our shadows. Bump up our samples to around 1,000. And that should be good. So let's go up to our settings here. Output, this is all good to go. I don't think we need all these frames, so I'm not gonna run it the whole length. 120. Like that. Go to save here. Let's create a new folder for this render. So we'll go to this main Godzilla effects folder. Let's find this folder here, double click, and we'll name this Godzilla and click save. You also want to check on your alpha channel here. TIFF is fine. change this to Octane or whatever render you are using, and this should be good to go. So now we can go ahead and click render. Now for the blood, this is also very simple. There's two ways you can do it. You can use 2D assets of green screen blood or whatever that you find. You can just drop it into After Effects. No need for any 3D software. As long as you check the 3D layer button, it'll follow your 3D camera and it'll float in 3D space, so you can position it that way. Or if you want to be more technical, if you want to create and tailor the blood to your liking, you guys can go into Cinema 4D, use Real Flow like how we did with the vomit, the slime earlier. And there's actually a good handful of tutorials on YouTube on how you can create blood using Real Flow. So you can customize the splatters. There's a bunch to really go in for that. Of course, there's so many different types, but if you guys want, I'll leave links below and you can tailor your own, make your own. If you guys want to replicate that same look where the blood is kind of suspended in midair, you guys can even find a place you like, right click, go to time, and then just freeze frame it. And then of course, since this is a 3D layer, you guys can move it, position it wherever you want. And as we move forward, you'll see the camera will walk right past it. I hope you guys did enjoy the tutorial. A lot of new information, new 3D things. As I learn more, I'm excited to pass that on to you and hopefully open up some new doors so you guys can explore some cool stuff, learn a lot of cool stuff. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one.